It was just another ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sun hangs lazily in the sky, birds chirp from the trees, and most folks are either finishing up work or running last-minute errands before dinner. Inside a neighborhood grocery store on the edge of town, the air hummed with the usual sounds: beeping scanners, rolling carts, the occasional baby cooing, and the low murmur of people chatting as they picked out their groceries. Near the self-checkout lanes, an elderly woman stood quietly, her silver hair neatly tied back, wearing a light blue cardigan and sensible shoes. She wasn't in a rush. She never was. Today she was picking up a few things for her grandchildren: chicken for their favorite dinner, some fresh fruit, maybe a small cake if they had one on sale. She'd raised 3 kids on her own after her husband passed, and now in her 70s, she still found joy in little things, like watching her grandkids' eyes light up when she walked through the door with their favorite treats. She reached for a large bag of rice, something she always bought in bulk because it lasted longer and saved money. But this one was heavier than she remembered, and as she tried to lift it onto the scanner, her hands trembled slightly. She adjusted her grip, took a breath, and tried again. The bag slipped. She bent down slowly, knees not what they used to be, and picked it up once more. This time she managed to get it halfway onto the belt, but the scanner wouldn't read the barcode. She tilted it, turned it, even wiped the label with her sleeve, but nothing worked. That's when the store manager came over. He was young, maybe in his 30s, with a tight expression and arms crossed like he'd already decided she was wasting his time. He didn't say hello, didn't ask if she needed help. Instead, he let out a sharp sigh loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. "Ma'am," he said, voice clipped, "you're holding up the line." She looked up, surprised. There wasn't even a line behind her, just one person bagging groceries a few feet away. But she stayed calm. She'd dealt with rude people before. Life had taught her patience. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "I'm just having a little trouble with this bag. Could you help me scan it?" He rolled his eyes. "You're supposed to know how this works. It's not that hard." A few people nearby glanced over. One woman paused her shopping. A teenage cashier slowed her scanning. Something about the tone felt off, too harsh, too dismissive, especially towards someone who clearly meant no harm. The elderly woman didn't argue. She just stood there holding the bag, waiting, maybe hoping he'd soften, maybe hoping for a little kindness. But instead he stepped closer, too close, and without warning he shoved her shoulder with the flat of his hand. Not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to make her stumble backward. Her foot caught on the edge of a display stand filled with snack bars and she wobbled, arms flailing for balance. The rice bag fell to the floor with a thud. Her glasses slipped down her nose. For a second, everything went quiet. Then came the gasps. Someone said, "Did he just?" Another voice, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" The elderly woman straightened up slowly, heart pounding, face burning with a mix of shock and humiliation. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked at him, really looked at him, with eyes that had seen decades of struggle, joy, loss, and resilience. And in that look was something he clearly didn't expect. Not fear, but disappointment. Deep, quiet disappointment. He muttered something under his breath, something like, "Get out of the way," and turned to walk off, as if nothing had happened. But it had happened, and someone had seen it all. From behind the nearby register, a young cashier, barely out of high school, had been watching the whole thing. Her hands were shaking, but she'd already pulled out her phone and hit record the moment the manager raised his voice. She didn't plan to post it. She just knew, deep in her gut, that what she'd just witnessed wasn't right. And if no one else was going to say something, maybe the video would. She finished her shift in silence, replaying the clip in her head. When she got home, she showed it to her older sister. "Should I post this?" she asked, voice small. Her sister watched it once, then again. Then she nodded. "Yeah, people need to see this." Within minutes, the video was online. It started with just a few views, friends, family, local community groups. But then a local news page shared it. Then a civil rights advocate. Then someone with a big following. The clip was only 45 seconds long, but it said everything. You could hear the sharp tone, see the shove, watch the woman's quiet dignity in the face of disrespect. Comments poured in. "This is unacceptable. My grandma could have been her. Why didn't anyone stop him?" Back at the store, no one said much. Employees avoided eye contact. Customers whispered as they shopped. The manager acted like nothing had happened, barking orders as usual. But the air had changed. Something had broken, and everyone could feel it. What no one knew yet was that miles away in a quiet office downtown, the owner of the entire grocery chain was about to see that video too. And she wasn't the kind of person who looked away, but that's a story for another moment. For now, in that ordinary grocery store on an ordinary Tuesday, an elderly woman picked up her bag of rice, adjusted her glasses and walked out, not with her head down, but with her back straight. She didn't buy the cake. She didn't feel like celebrating anymore, but she did stop at the pharmacy on the way home and buy some pain relievers for her shoulder. And as she sat on her porch later that evening, sipping tea and watching the sunset, she made a quiet promise to herself. She wouldn't stay silent. Not this time, because sometimes one moment of cruelty can spark something much bigger, and sometimes the quietest people have the loudest impact. The video didn't just spread, it exploded. By the time the sun dipped below the rooftops that evening, what had started as a shaky phone clip from a nervous teenager had turned into something no one could ignore. It wasn't just shared in group chats or local Facebook pages anymore. News stations picked it up. Community leaders reposted it. Even people who'd never set foot in that grocery store were watching, reacting, talking. And the reason it hit so hard wasn't just because of what happened. It was how it happened. There was no shouting match, no dramatic fight. Just a quiet older woman trying to do her shopping, and a man in a store vest shoving her like she was nothing. Like her dignity didn't matter. Like her age, her presence, her humanity meant zero. People saw themselves in her. Their mothers. Their grandmothers. Their aunts who still walked to the store every week because they liked to pick out their own fruit. That's what made it personal. It wasn't just an incident. It felt like an attack on decency itself. Within an hour of the video going up, the grocery store's social media pages were flooded. Not with complaints about prices or out-of-stock items, but with one question over and over: what are you going to do about this? Some comments were angry. Others were heartbroken. A few were from former employees who wrote things like, "This isn't the first time he's acted like this," or "We've all seen him treat certain customers differently." Those messages hit especially hard. It wasn't just one bad moment, it was part of a pattern. And that made it worse. Meanwhile, inside the store, things got tense. Employees kept their heads down, afraid to say anything. The manager who'd done it? He acted like nothing was wrong. He even joked with a coworker about all the drama online, as if it were just gossip, not evidence of something serious. But others weren't laughing. The cashier who'd recorded it stayed home the next day, too shaken to come in. She kept refreshing her phone, watching the views climb. 5,000, 10,000, 50,000. Each number felt heavier than the last. At the corporate office, phones started ringing off the hook. Customers called to cancel their loyalty accounts. Local organizations demanded answers. A few even threatened to organize a boycott if the company didn't respond quickly and honestly. But for hours, then most of the night, there was silence from the top. No statement. No apology. Not even an acknowledgement that they'd seen the video. That silence spoke louder than words. People began to wonder, did the company even care? Or were they just hoping it would blow over? But then, something unexpected happened. Late that night, a woman who rarely stepped into any of her stores, let alone this one, saw the video. She wasn't just any executive. She was the founder. The one who'd started this whole chain from a single corner shop 20 years ago. Working double shifts, saving every penny, dreaming of a place where everyone, no matter their age, color, or how much they spent, would feel welcome. She watched the clip once. Then again. The third time, she paused it right at the moment the elderly woman stumbled. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, staring at the screen, her hands resting on her desk. Her eyes didn't blink. Her jaw tightened, and then without calling anyone, without sending an email, without even grabbing her coat properly, she walked out of her office, got into her car, and started driving. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not her assistant.
Not security.
Not even her closest advisors. She just knew she had to be there, in person, before the sun came up. Back in the neighborhood, the elderly woman was sitting in her living room, wrapped in a soft blanket, watching the local news. They were talking about the video now. A reporter stood outside the store, interviewing shoppers. One woman said, "I've shopped. there for 10 years, but after seeing that, I'm done. Another man shook his head. That could have been my mom. And if the store doesn't do something real, not just PR stuff, then they don't deserve our business. She turned off the TV. She didn't want to hear more. Not because she was ashamed, she'd done nothing wrong, but because it hurt to see how easily people could be treated like they didn't matter. She'd lived through harder times, sure, but kindness had always been her compass. And seeing it thrown away like that, it left a mark. Still, she wasn't angry in the loud way people expected. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted it to mean something. For someone to say, this was wrong, and actually mean it. Not just for her, but for everyone who'd ever been made to feel small in a place that's supposed to serve them. Unbeknownst to her, that was exactly what was about to happen. Because while the internet buzzed and the store staff held their breath, the founder was already on the road, headlights cutting through the dark, her mind made up. She hadn't built her business on profits alone. She'd built it on respect. And respect had just been broken, on camera in front of everyone. By the time dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges, she pulled into the store's nearly empty parking lot. She didn't go through the front door like a customer. She walked straight to the employee entrance, badge in hand, and let herself in. The morning crew hadn't even arrived yet. The store was quiet, shelves half-stocked, lights still dim. She stood in the aisle near the self-checkout, the very spot where it happened, and just looked around. Then she walked to the back office, poured herself a cup of coffee from the break room, and waited. She didn't yell. She didn't post anything online. She just showed up. And in that simple act, choosing to be there in person before the workday even began, she sent a message louder than any press release ever could. This matters. She matters. And we're going to fix this. The video had gone viral, yes. But what came next wouldn't be about views or likes. It would be about action, about accountability, about proving that when someone is wronged in your house, you don't hide, you step up. And the people inside that store? They had no idea their world was about to change, forever, in just a matter of minutes. The store was still quiet when she walked in. Just the hum of refrigerators, the occasional beep from a motion sensor light, and the soft shuffle of a night stalker finishing up in the dairy aisle. No one expected her. Not today. Not ever, really. She hadn't set foot in this location in over 3 years. Most employees had only seen her picture in the company newsletter or during rare holiday video messages. To them, she was more of a symbol than a person. The founder, the boss, the one whose name was on the letterhead. But today she wasn't a logo or a title. She was just a woman who'd seen something wrong and couldn't look away. She didn't announce herself. Didn't call for a meeting. She just stood near the back office, sipping her coffee, watching as the first few employees trickled in. Cashiers tying their aprons, stockers unloading carts, a shift supervisor checking the schedule board. There was a tension in the air, thick and heavy, like everyone knew something big was coming, but no one wanted to be the first to say it. Then she stepped forward. Her presence hit like a quiet thunderclap. The chatter stopped. Eyes widened. Someone dropped a box of cereal. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. She simply said, "I need to speak with the store manager and his team. Now." The assistant manager, a man who'd worked there for 6 years, swallowed hard and nodded. He knocked on the manager's office door. A moment later, the man who'd shoved the elderly woman walked out, adjusting his tie like it was just another Tuesday. He froze when he saw her. For a second, he looked confused, then nervous, then defensive. She didn't greet him, didn't shake his hand. She just walked past him into the small office, motioning for him and the 2 assistant managers to follow. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing them in with the weight of what had happened. Inside, the room felt smaller than usual. Posters about teamwork and customer first hung on the walls, suddenly ironic. She sat down slowly, placed her coffee on the desk, and pulled out her phone. Without a word, she tapped the screen and turned it toward them. The video started playing. They watched in silence as the scene unfolded. The elderly woman struggling with the bag, the sharp tone, the shove, the stumble. The audio was clear, the body language unmistakable. When it ended, she didn't say anything right away. She just looked at each of them one by one, her eyes steady, searching. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm but firm, like a parent who's seen their child make a serious mistake and isn't angry but deeply disappointed. "Did you see this happen?" she asked the first assistant manager. He shifted in his seat. I was near the registers. I saw part of it. Did you step in?" He looked down. "I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," she repeated, not loudly, but with enough weight to make him flinch. She was trying to scan her groceries. He pushed her. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's a failure." She turned to the second assistant. "And you?" "I was in the back," he mumbled. "But I heard people talking after. I figured it would get handled." "Handled by who?" she asked. "You're the leadership team. If you don't act, who will?" Then she looked at the store manager, the one who'd done it. He crossed his arms, jaw tight. "Look," he said, "I didn't mean to hurt her. She was blocking the lane, slowing everything down. I just wanted to move her along. It wasn't even a real shove. She didn't interrupt. She let him finish. And when he did, she leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping lower but sharper. You work in a place where people come to feed their families. Some are tired, some are sick, some are old and just trying to get through the day with a little dignity. And your job, your only job, is to treat them like human beings. Not obstacles, not problems, people." She paused, letting that sink in. "You didn't just push her shoulder," she continued. "You pushed away everything this company stands for. And worse, you had two people right here who saw it and said nothing. That's not just your failure, it's all of yours." The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Outside, employees gathered near the break room whispering. They could feel something shifting. The air had changed. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper. A sense that justice wasn't coming from a press release or a corporate hotline. It was walking in the room, looking you in the eye and asking, "What did you do when it mattered?" The founder stood up. She didn't pace, didn't gesture wildly. She just stood tall, her presence filling the space. "I didn't build this company to make money," she said softly. "I built it to make a difference. To create a place where anyone, no matter who they are, feels safe, respected, and seen." And yesterday that promise was broken. Not by a customer, not by a stranger, by the people I trusted to protect it. She looked at the store manager again. "You chose to use your hands instead of your words. You chose power over patience. That's not leadership. That's abuse of authority." Then she turned to the assistants. "And you chose silence. You watched someone be disrespected and did nothing. In my book, that's just as bad." No one argued. No one made excuses this time. They just sat there, small under the weight of her words, because deep down they knew she was right. And what happened next wouldn't be about punishment alone. It would be about rebuilding. But first the old had to go. The rot had to be cut out cleanly and completely, so something better could grow in its place. She took a breath, looked at each of them one last time. Then she said the words that would change everything. "You're all let go." Effective immediately, there was no shouting, no drama. Just the quiet finality of a line being drawn and crossed. Security was called. Not roughly, but respectfully. Their badges were collected, their lockers cleared. As they walked out through the back door, heads down, the morning sun rising behind them, the rest of the staff watched in stunned silence. But it wasn't shock they felt. It was relief, because sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do isn't to speak, but to act. And in that small office on an ordinary Wednesday morning, she didn't just fire 3 people. She reminded everyone who was left what really mattered. And that lesson, it would echo far beyond those store walls. After the 3 managers walked out, bags in hand, faces pale, silence trailing behind them, the store didn't erupt into chaos. It didn't collapse. In fact, something unexpected happened. A quiet calm settled over the place, like the air itself had exhaled. Employees stood in the aisles, near the registers, by the coffee machine in the break room, just looking at each other. No one cheered. No one clapped. But you could see it in their eyes. The relief, the disbelief, the dawning realization that someone at the very top had actually seen them. Not just as workers, but as people who'd been carrying a weight they couldn't name. The founder didn't leave right away. Instead, she walked through the store slowly, like she was seeing it for the first time. She stopped by the self-checkout lane, the exact spot where it happened, and just stood there for a moment. Then she turned and headed toward the front, where the rest of the team had gathered, unsure what to do next. She didn't stand on a box or call for a microphone. She just leaned against a shelf of canned goods, folded her arms and spoke like she was talking to friends over coffee. "I know this hasn't been easy," she began, her voice steady but warm. "Some of you have watched things happen here that didn't sit right. Maybe you spoke up, maybe you wanted to but didn't know how. Maybe you stayed quiet because you were scared of losing your job, of being labeled a troublemaker, of not being believed." She paused, letting those words hang in the air. "I get it. But from this moment on, that changes. Because this store, this whole company, isn't about sales numbers or perfect shelves. It's about how we treat each other. How we treat our neighbors. How we treat someone who's just trying to buy rice for their grandkids." A few employees nodded. One young woman wiped her eyes quickly, pretending to adjust her hair. "I fired those 3 people not because I wanted to," she continued, "but because I had to. When someone in charge forgets that kindness is part of the job, they don't belong in charge. And when others see something wrong and say nothing, that silence becomes part of the problem too." She looked around, making eye contact with as many as she could. "But you're still here, and that tells me something. It tells me you care. Maybe you've been waiting for someone to say, it's okay to speak up. Well, I'm saying it now." Then she did something no corporate leader ever does. She asked for help. "I don't have all the answers," she admitted. "I can't fix everything from an office downtown. But you're here every day. You see what works. You see what doesn't, so I'm asking, what do you need? What would make this place feel like one where everyone, customers and coworkers, can walk in and feel respected?" At first no one spoke. Then a stalker in the back raised his hand slightly. "Maybe more training? Not just on how to run the register, but on how to handle tough moments without losing your cool?" She nodded. "Yes, absolutely," a cashier added. "And maybe a way to report things without fear. Like if something happens, we know it'll be taken seriously." "Already working on it," she said. "Starting today, we're setting up a confidential hotline run by people outside the company, so your voice is heard, not buried." Another employee spoke up. "What about her? The lady who was pushed? Is she okay?" The room went still again. The founder's expression softened. "I'm going to see her later today," she said quietly. "In person. Not with cameras, not for show, just to say I'm sorry. And to listen." That simple sentence meant more than any press release ever could. Over the next hour, the mood in the store shifted. People started talking, not just about what went wrong, but about what could go right. Ideas flowed. A customer respect pledge posted at every entrance. Monthly team discussions about real situations, not just scripted role plays. Even a small kindness board, where customers could leave notes about staff who went the extra mile. No one was pretending everything was perfect. But for the first time in a long time, people felt like they had a say, like their dignity mattered as much as the store's profits. Meanwhile, outside, the world was still watching. News vans had arrived. Reporters stood near the parking lot, microphones ready. But the founder didn't go out to them. She stayed inside, helping restock a fallen display, chatting with a new hire, even scanning a few items for an elderly customer who recognized her and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't want this to be a spectacle. She wanted it to be real. And real change doesn't happen in headlines. It happens in quiet conversations. In the way a manager kneels to help someone pick up dropped groceries. In the way a cashier says, "Take your time" instead of "next." It happens when people feel safe enough to speak up, and leaders humble enough to listen. By midday, word had spread through the neighborhood. Customers started coming back, not out of curiosity but out of hope. One woman brought cookies for the staff. A man who hadn't shopped there in months said, "I saw what happened, and I saw what you did after. That means something." The founder stayed until closing time. She didn't give a speech. She didn't take photos. She just worked alongside the team, restocking shelves, answering questions, showing by example that leadership isn't about a title, it's about showing up. And as she finally walked out that evening, keys in hand, she didn't look back at the store with pride. She looked at it with responsibility. Because firing the wrong people was only the first step. The real work, the hard daily work of rebuilding trust, of making sure this never happened again, that was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, everyone in that store believed it was possible. That evening, as the streetlights flickered on and the last customers trickled out of the store, The founder didn't head back to her office or call a press conference. Instead, she got into her car, checked the address one more time, and drove across town to a quiet neighborhood lined with old oak trees and front porches wrapped in fairy lights. She wasn't going there as a CEO. She wasn't carrying a camera crew or a PR team. She was going simply as one person to see another. She parked a few houses down, walked slowly up the sidewalk, and knocked gently on the door. A moment later it opened, and there she was, the woman from the video, still wearing the same soft cardigan, her eyes a little tired but clear, her posture calm. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then the founder said, "I'm so sorry. Not, I'm sorry this happened. Not, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Just, I'm so sorry." Those two words hung in the air like something sacred. No excuses, no corporate language. Just human regret. The woman studied her face, searching for sincerity, and found it. After a pause, she stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and old books. Family photos covered the walls. Smiling faces at graduations, birthdays, backyard barbecues. A cat curled up on the armchair. It was the kind of home built on love, not luxury. They sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of tea between them, steam curling into the quiet. "I didn't come here to explain or defend," the founder began. "I came to listen, to hear how this affected you, and to tell you face to face that what happened was wrong, deeply wrong, and it will never happen again, not while I'm in charge." The woman wrapped her hands around her mug. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. But her words carried the weight of a lifetime. "I've been treated unfairly before," she said softly. "People assume things because of how I look or how old I am. But this felt different. It wasn't just rude. It felt like I didn't matter. Like my presence was a problem." She looked out the window for a moment, then back. "I didn't go to the store to cause trouble. I just wanted to buy dinner for my grandkids, and to be treated like a person." The founder nodded, eyes glistening. "You are a person. And you always will be, in every one of our stores from this day forward." They talked for nearly an hour. Not about policies or press coverage, but about life. About raising children alone. About working hard and still being overlooked. About how kindness costs nothing but means everything. The founder listened more than she spoke. And in that listening, something real passed between them. Not just an apology, but a promise. Before she left, the founder didn't offer money. Didn't hand over a gift card or a public gesture. She simply said, "If you're willing, I'd be honored if you'd help us do better." Not as a victim, but as a guide. The woman thought about it. Then she smiled, a small, quiet smile that held both pain and hope. "All right," she said, "but only if you mean it." "I do," the founder replied, "with all my heart." Back at her car, the founder sat for a long moment staring at the dashboard. She wasn't thinking about stock prices or headlines. She was thinking about how easy it is to forget that behind every policy, every store, every customer complaint, there's a human being with a story, a heart, and a right to be treated with basic decency. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, she sent a company-wide email. No fancy subject line, just 3 words: "We can do better." Inside, she shared part of what the woman had told her. Not her name, not her address, just her truth. She wrote about how dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right, and how every employee, from the stalker to the CEO, has a role in protecting it. Then she announced 3 things. First, mandatory training for all staff on respectful communication, de-escalation, and unconscious bias developed with local community leaders, not just HR consultants. Second, a new respect pledge posted at every store entrance, written in plain language. "We see you. We honor you. We're here to serve you, with kindness always." And third, a customer advisory council made up of real shoppers from the community, including elders and people of all backgrounds, to give honest feedback directly to leadership. But the most powerful part of the email wasn't the plan. It was the closing line. "If you ever see someone treated unfairly in our store, whether it's a customer or a coworker, speak up. Not because it's policy, because it's the right thing to do. And I'll have your back." That message spread faster than any press release. Employees printed it out, taped it to break room walls, texted it to friends at other chains. For the first time, they didn't just work for a company, They believed in it. Meanwhile, the story kept growing, not as a scandal, but as a turning point. Local news covered the changes. Community groups praised the transparency. Even competitors took notice, quietly reviewing their own practices. But the real test came a week later, when the elderly woman walked back into the store. She didn't come for attention. She came for groceries. But the moment she stepped through the door, something shifted. The cashier who'd recorded the video saw her first. She didn't say anything loud, just smiled and said, "Welcome back." Other staff nodded. One young stalker offered to carry her bags to the car, and near the self-checkout a new sign stood tall. "Take your time. We're here to help." She didn't need help that day, but she appreciated the offer, because this time she didn't feel like a problem. She felt like she belonged, and that, more than any firing, any policy, any headline, was the real victory. Not just fixing what was broken, but making sure everyone who walked through those doors knew, without a doubt, that they mattered. In the weeks that followed, something quiet but powerful began to take root, not just in that one store but across the entire chain. It wasn't flashy. There were no grand announcements or viral stunts. Instead, change showed up in small everyday moments that added up to something real. Customers started noticing right away. The cashier who used to rush through transactions now made eye contact and asked, "How's your day going?" The stalker who once ignored dropped items now bent down without being asked to help an elderly shopper pick up a fallen can. Even the tone over the intercom softened, from sharp robotic alerts to warm human reminders like, "Don't forget your reusable bags." But the biggest shift wasn't just in how staff treated customers. It was in how they treated each other. For the first time, team meetings weren't just about sales goals or shrinkage reports. They included open conversations, real ones, about what respect looked like on the floor. One employee shared how they'd once stayed silent when they saw a coworker mocked for their accent. Another admitted they'd been afraid to report a manager's harsh comments. And instead of being shut down, they were heard, supported. The new training sessions weren't boring lectures. They were honest, sometimes uncomfortable discussions led by people from the community, retired teachers, local faith leaders, even a former social worker, who didn't just teach rules, but reminded everyone why they mattered. "Kindness isn't weakness," one facilitator said during a session. "It's strength. Because it takes courage to choose patience when you're stressed, to choose empathy when it's easier to look away." Employees began to feel like they had permission, not just to do their jobs, but to be human while doing them. Meanwhile, the woman who'd been pushed didn't vanish into the background like so many victims do. She stayed involved, not as a symbol, but as a partner. She attended the first community advisory meeting, sitting at a long table with store managers, corporate reps, and neighbors from all walks of life. She didn't speak often, but when she did, everyone listened. Once she shared a simple idea. Put a bench near the entrance. Not for show, for real. So folks who need to rest, maybe they're tired, maybe they're waiting for a ride, can sit without feeling like they're in the way. Within a week, benches appeared at every store. She also suggested that staff be trained not just to spot problems, but to notice needs. "Sometimes," she said gently, "a person struggling with a heavy bag isn't being slow. They're just doing their best with what they've got." That idea became part of the new onboarding. Look for the need behind the action. Outside the company, the story kept rippling. Other businesses reached out, not for PR tips but for guidance. A pharmacy chain asked how they could create a similar customer council. A local restaurant owner started weekly respect check-ins with his team after hearing what happened. Even city officials took note, inviting the founder to speak at a small business forum about ethical leadership. But the most unexpected turn came from the legal side. The local district attorney's office reviewed the video and witness statements. They determined that the shove, though not violent in the way people imagine assault, was still an unprovoked physical act against a vulnerable person. Charges were filed, misdemeanor assault. The former manager didn't deny it. His lawyer argued it was a momentary lapse, but the court saw it differently. He was ordered to complete community service, attend anger management counseling, and stay away from the store and its customers. Importantly, the case wasn't sensationalized. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes or media circuses. but it sent a clear message. Disrespect that crosses into physical contact, even a light shove, has consequences. And the law protects dignity, not just property. Back at the store, life settled into a new rhythm. Sales, which had dipped slightly after the incident, began to climb again, not because of discounts or ads, but because people trusted the place again. Regulars returned. New families came in, drawn by word of mouth. They actually care there. One afternoon, a young mother came in with her toddler, struggling to push a cart while holding her child's hand. Before she could even ask, a stalker walked over, smiled, and said, "Let me hold your little one for a sec while you grab what you need." The mother nearly cried, not from sadness, but from relief. That small act of kindness reminded her she wasn't alone. That's when it became clear. The real healing wasn't just about fixing a mistake. It was about building something better in its place, and the woman who started it all, she kept shopping there, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She'd wave to the staff, sometimes stay for a quick chat near the fruit section. She never asked for special treatment. She just showed up as herself. One day, a reporter asked her if she felt vindicated. She shook her head. "I don't need vindication," she said. "I needed to be seen. And now maybe others will be too." Her words spread, not in headlines, but in hushed conversations between neighbors, in sermons at local churches, in school lessons about standing up for what's right. Because the truth was, this wasn't just her story. It was everyone's. It was about what happens when someone chooses cruelty and what happens when others choose courage. It was about how one moment of disrespect can shake a community, and how one act of accountability can begin to mend it. And most of all, it was proof that change doesn't always come from protests or petitions. Sometimes, it starts with a quiet "I'm sorry," a listening ear, and the willingness to do better, one grocery bag at a time. 6 months after that quiet Tuesday afternoon, the store didn't just look different, it felt different. The same shelves, the same layout, even many of the same employees. But the air had changed. It was lighter, warmer, like walking into a place where people actually saw you, not just your shopping cart. The changes weren't just inside the building either. They spilled out into the neighborhood. Every Saturday morning, the parking lot now hosted a small community table. Fresh produce from local farms, flyers for food drives, sometimes even a free blood pressure check from a nearby clinic. It started as a simple idea from the Customer Advisory Council. If people come here to feed their families, why not help them in other ways too? Now it was a weekly tradition. Inside, the respect pledge hung by every entrance, printed on simple wood boards with clean lettering. Customers often paused to read it. Some even took photos, not for social media clout, but because it reminded them of how things should be. One elderly man told a cashier, "I've been coming here for 20 years, but I've never felt this welcome." The training program had grown too. It wasn't a one-time lecture anymore. It was woven into the culture. New hires spent their first day not just learning how to run the register, but how to recognize when someone might be having a hard day, and how to respond with patience, not judgment. Role-playing wasn't about perfect scripts. It was about real situations. A customer confused by prices, a child having a meltdown, an older person needing extra time. The goal wasn't speed. It was humanity, and it showed. Employees began sharing stories in team huddles, not just about sales, but about moments that mattered. Like the time a cashier noticed a woman counting coins carefully at the register and quietly covered the 75-cent difference without making a scene. Or when a stalker walked an elderly man to his car in the rain, holding an umbrella over both of them. These weren't grand gestures. They were small, quiet acts of care, and they became the new standard. Meanwhile, the founder made good on her promise. She didn't disappear after the headlines faded. She visited stores regularly, not as a boss checking boxes, but as a listener. She'd sit in the break room, eat a sandwich with the night crew, ask how things were really going. People started calling her by her first name, not her title, and she remembered theirs. But perhaps the most powerful shift was invisible to outsiders. Trust had returned, not just from customers, but among the team itself. People weren't afraid to speak up anymore. If someone acted unfairly, others stepped in, not with anger, but with calm correction. "Hey, that's not how we do things here." And because leadership had proven they'd back them up, those words carried weight. Even the legal outcome became part of the lesson, not as punishment but as accountability. The former manager completed his community service at a senior center, something he later admitted changed his perspective. He never returned to retail, but in a quiet statement released through his lawyer, he said he'd learned that authority means responsibility, not control. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty is the first step toward real change. Back in the neighborhood, the woman who'd been pushed kept living her life, baking pies for her grandkids, tending her garden, attending church on Sundays. But she also became something unexpected, a quiet symbol of resilience. Not because she wanted to be, but because people needed to see that standing up for dignity wasn't about being loud, it was about being steady. She agreed to one public appearance, the company's annual leadership summit, held in a modest community hall instead of a fancy hotel, by her request. When she walked in, the room, filled with managers from dozens of stores, rose to their feet. Not because she asked them to, but because they wanted to. She didn't give a speech full of big words. She just said, "I'm not here because I was wronged. I'm here because I was heard. And if my moment of pain can help someone else feel seen, then it wasn't wasted." Her words stayed with everyone long after she sat down. The founder, standing at the podium later that day, looked out at the room and said something simple but powerful. "We didn't fix everything in a day, and we won't. But every time we choose kindness over convenience, respect over routine, we build something worth protecting." After the summit, something beautiful happened. Stores across the chain began adopting their own small acts of care. One location started a buddy system for new hires, so no one felt alone on their first week. Another created a gratitude jar where customers could drop notes about staff who helped them, notes that were read aloud at team meetings. In another town, employees pooled tips to buy winter coats for families in need. None of it was required. None of it was for show. It just grew naturally from a shared belief that business isn't just about transactions. It's about connection. And slowly, the story stopped being about one incident. It became about what happened after. About how a company chose to listen instead of defend, to act instead of delay, to honor a person instead of protect a reputation. Customers noticed. Employees felt it. Even competitors began asking, "How did you do that?" The answer was never complicated. It was just human. See people, treat them well, own your mistakes, and never assume that one small act of disrespect doesn't matter, because it always does. By the end of that year, the store where it all began was thriving, not just in sales, but in spirit. People didn't just shop there. They belonged there, and that sense of belonging, it spread one kind word, one helping hand, one quiet act of courage at a time. Because real change doesn't roar, it whispers. And if you're willing to listen, it can change everything. A full year had passed since that quiet Tuesday afternoon, and the store no longer felt like the same place. It wasn't just the new benches by the entrance, or the community table in the parking lot, or even the framed respect pledge that greeted every customer. It was something deeper. The way people moved through the aisles, the way voices softened near the self-checkout, the way a simple, "How are you today?" actually meant something. But the biggest change came on a bright Saturday morning in early spring, when the store held a small ceremony no one saw coming. There were no banners, no TV cameras, just neighbors, employees, and a few local leaders gathered near the front doors. At the center stood a simple wooden sign, freshly painted with clean, bold letters. Eleanor Hayes Community Market. The woman who'd once been shoved for struggling with a bag of rice stood quietly beside it. Her hands folded, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with quiet pride. She hadn't asked for this. In fact, she'd tried to talk them out of it at first. "I'm just one person," she'd said. "This isn't about me." But the founder had gently insisted. "It's not about making you famous," she explained. "It's about reminding everyone who walks through these doors what this place stands for now. And your name, your dignity, is the perfect symbol of that," so they renamed it, not as a grand gesture, but as a promise. A living reminder that respect isn't optional, that every person, no matter their age, their pace, or their story, deserves to be treated like they belong. Inside the store that day, things felt different in the best way. Kids helped stock the kindness shelf, a section where customers could donate snacks or toiletries for families in need. Local artists had painted a mural on the back wall showing hands of all colors passing groceries, helping each other, smiling. Even the music playing over the speakers was chosen by the community. Soft jazz, old soul songs, the kind that made you want to slow down and breathe. Later that afternoon, the founder stood at the front of the store for a short talk, not on a stage, just near the fruit display, where people could gather naturally. She didn't wear a suit. Just a simple blouse and a Fresh Mart apron like any other team member. I used to think leadership was about making smart decisions. She began, voice calm and steady. But this past year taught me something more important. Leadership is about making human decisions. It's about looking someone in the eye when they've been hurt and saying, "I see you, and I'll do better." She paused, glancing toward the woman now honored in the store's name. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to shout, but to listen. Not to defend, but to change. And not just for a day, but every single day after. The crowd didn't clap loudly. They nodded. They smiled. Some wiped their eyes. Because they knew this wasn't just a speech. It was a reflection of what they'd all lived through together. Afterward, people lingered. They chatted with staff, shared stories, bought groceries not because they had to, but because they wanted to be part of this place. A young father let his toddler help pick apples. An older couple held hands as they walked down the cereal aisle. A teenager who'd once recorded a video on her phone now worked behind the counter, promoted to shift lead, not for going viral, but for her honesty and heart. And the woman whose name now graced the sign? She didn't give a speech. She didn't need to. She simply walked through the store, greeting people like old friends, stopping to admire the mural, even helping a child reach a box of crackers on a high shelf. In that moment, she wasn't a symbol. She was just herself, kind, steady, and finally fully seen. In the months that followed, the ripple kept spreading. Other stores in the chain began adopting similar community names, honoring local teachers, veterans, volunteers, always with permission, always with meaning. The training program became a model for small businesses across the state. Even schools started using the Respect Pledge in classrooms, not as a rule, but as a daily reminder. We see you. We honor you. But perhaps the most beautiful part was what didn't happen. No one forgot. Employees still told new hires the story, not to shame, but to teach. This is why we pause, they'd say. This is why we listen. Customers sometimes pointed to the sign and whispered to their kids, "That's the lady who reminded us all to be kind." And every year on that same Tuesday in spring, the store held a day of dignity, not with sales or promotions, but with simple acts. Free coffee for elders, handwritten thank you notes for staff, a moment of silence to remember that everyone carries unseen burdens. The founder never called it a success story. She called it a work in progress, because real change isn't a finish line, it's a daily choice. To be patient when you're tired, to speak up when it's easier to stay quiet, to treat the person in front of you like they matter, because they do. Years later, long after the news cycle had moved on and the video had faded from feeds, people still came to that store not just for groceries, but for something harder to name, a sense of belonging. A place where dignity wasn't earned. It was given freely to everyone who walked through the door. And in the end, that was the true legacy. Not a firing, not a headline, not even a renamed building. But the quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single moment of courage and the willingness of others to respond with grace. Because in a world that often moves too fast, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is slow down, look someone in the eye and say, "Take your time. I've got you," and that changes everything.